Dinner bells began chiming across the various decks, calling passengers to evening service. Through the dining room windows below, I could see white uniformed waiters lighting candles on tables set with gleaming crystal and silver. Lily hugged me fiercely. "Promise me you won't drink anything they give you."
Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, sweetheart.
"Now go to the kids' club and try to have fun. This will all be over soon." As she hurried away toward the ship's activity center, I remained standing at the deck railing, watching the dining rooms fill with families enjoying their vacation. Somewhere below, Derrick and Evelyn were preparing to join me for what they believed would be my last meal. My hands gripped the railing as the full weight of betrayal settled over me. The son I'd raised, supported, and loved unconditionally had decided I was worth more dead than alive. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated a 10-year-old's courage and a grandfather's determination to protect her. 90 minutes had passed since Lily's warning, and I sat alone at a corner table in the ship's elegant bar, pretending to study the dinner menu while my eyes tracked every movement around me. The Ocean View Lounge buzzed with pre-dinner cocktails and civilized conversation, crystal glasses catching the soft amber lighting. I'd positioned myself strategically back to the wall, clear view of all entrances, close enough to the bar to hear orders, but far enough away to avoid seeming paranoid. My phone lay beside the menu, voice recorder app ready, though the screen appeared dark. "Frank," Derrick's voice boomed across the lounge with false heartiness.
There you are, Dad. We've been looking everywhere.
They approached with practiced smiles. Derrick in his best vacation shirt.
Evelyn in a flowing sundress that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent.
But I could see the calculation behind their eyes now. The predatory assessment I'd been blind to for years.
Mind if we join you?
Evelyn slid into the chair across from me without waiting for an answer. We thought it would be nice to have drinks together before dinner, like a proper family vacation. Absolutely. Derrick signaled the bartender with an authoritative wave. 3 martinis, please. Grey Goose, extra dry, just like my dad always orders. The bartender nodded and began preparing the drinks, but something in Derrick's tone made my skin crawl. Too specific, too insistent. I'd never been particular about vodka brands, and Derrick knew it.
Actually, I said casually, closing the menu, I'm feeling a bit queasy from the ship's motion today. Think I'll skip alcohol and stick to ginger ale.
Derrick's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second.
Come on, Dad, 1 martini won't hurt.
We're celebrating our family time together. The last family time we might have, Evelyn added, with what she probably thought was meaningful sentiment. Who knows when we'll all be together like this again? The irony of her words would have been darkly amusing if the situation weren't so terrifying. She was right. This might indeed be our last time together, but not for the reasons she was pretending. Thanks, but my stomach's been bothering me since lunch. I gestured toward my midsection apologetically. Sea legs aren't what they used to be at my age. You two go ahead and enjoy yourselves. Derrick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly.
Dad, it's 1 drink for family harmony.
The pressure in his voice was unmistakable now.
He needed me to drink that martini. Needed it desperately enough to keep pushing despite my clear refusal.
The realization that my son was trying to poison me hit me anew, though I kept my expression neutral. How about this instead? I stood up, pulling out my wallet.
Dinner's on me tonight.
Both of you order whatever you want. Celebrate properly. I'm going to walk off this nausea and meet you in the dining room. Before they could protest further, I left enough cash on the table to cover their drinks and walked toward the lounge exit. Behind me, I heard Derrick's frustrated sigh and Evelyn's sharp whisper.
He's being difficult.
I made it appear as though I was heading toward the elevators, but instead ducked into the corridor leading to the guest cabin areas. Their interior stateroom was on Deck 5, and the ship's layout made it easy to position myself near their door without being obvious. Through the thin walls, their voices carried clearly once they returned to their cabin 20 minutes later.
He suspects something, Evelyn said, her voice sharp with frustration. Did you see how he refused the drink?
He's never refused alcohol before.
Maybe he really is feeling sick from the ship.
Don't be naive, Derek. Your father's been sailing before. He doesn't get seasick. Something clinked against a table. Probably a glass being set down hard. We'll have to be more direct.
What do you mean?
Tonight, during his usual deck walk, he always takes that stroll around 10 Peaks to look at the stars. The patrol shift changes at 9:30, just like we planned. 15 minutes with minimal security coverage. My hands shook slightly as I activated my phone's voice recorder, holding it close to the wall.
Push him over.
Derek's voice was barely audible.
It's the only way now.
Make it look like he slipped on the wet deck.
Tragic accident. Elderly man loses his balance.
The insurance will pay out and will inherit everything within 6 months.
I'd heard enough. More than enough. Back in my suite, I replayed the recording 3 times.
Each playback making the reality more horrifying. My son's voice discussing my murder with the same tone he might use to plan a grocery shopping trip. The life jacket hanging in my closet caught my eye as I paced the small sitting area. They thought they were hunting a helpless old man. They had no idea the old man was now hunting them. The harbour pilot boat guided us through the coral reefs surrounding Hamilton. As I stood at the ship's rail, watching Bermuda's pink sand beaches and pastel houses grow larger, my escape bag sat hidden behind a life preserver rack, packed with essentials and the recorded evidence of my son's murder plot. 14 hours had passed since I'd learned the truth. 14 hours of sleepless planning pacing my suite, while Derek and Evelyn presumably slept peacefully in their cabin below, confident their victim remained unaware. The gangway lowered with mechanical precision as dock workers secured the massive ship to concrete pilings. Passengers began streaming toward the exits, chattering excitedly about shopping in Hamilton and swimming in crystal blue coves.
I could be among them.
Walk off this ship, catch a flight to New York, and file a police report from the safety of my own home. Let Derek and Evelyn explain to authorities why they'd planned my murder. My hand closed around the bag strap. Grandpa. Lily's voice rang out across the deck as she ran toward me, already dressed for shore excursion in her bright yellow sundress and sandals.
Isn't it beautiful?
Look at the water.
It's like swimming in liquid jewels.
Her excitement stopped me cold. Behind her, I could see other passengers' children bouncing with anticipation, families preparing for a day of snorkeling and beach exploration. Normal families, healthy families, where grandparents didn't flee from murderous children. Princess, I need to handle some business matters on shore. The lie tasted bitter. Boring grown-up stuff. You go with your parents and have fun. Her face fell immediately. But you promised we'd go snorkeling together. You said you'd show me how to find concrete shells.
I know, sweetheart, but sometimes adult responsibilities. No? The word exploded from her with surprising force. Grandpa, please don't leave me alone with them. Please don't go.
Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. Fear. The same terror I'd seen yesterday when she'd warned me about the poison.
They'll hurt you if I'm not here to stop them, she whispered, grabbing my hand with both of hers. And if you leave, who's going to protect me? The question hit me like a physical blow.
In my desperation to save myself, I'd forgotten the most important truth. Lily would remain trapped on this ship with 2 people who'd already proven they were capable of murder. People who might decide a 10-year-old witness was too dangerous to keep alive. My escape bag suddenly felt like a coward solution. You're right, Princess. I knelt down to her eye level.
I'm not going anywhere.
We're in this together, remember? But what about the danger? What about what they're planning? Sometimes the best way to handle bullies is to stand up to them instead of running away. I squeezed her hands gently. And sometimes grown-ups need to learn there are consequences for making bad choices. Derek and Evelyn emerged from the ship's interior, dressed for their own shore excursion. They spotted us near the gangway, and I saw them exchange a meaningful glance. Derek approached with his usual forced cheerfulness.
Not going to shore, Dad. Bermuda's supposed to be spectacular. Changed my mind.
Think I'll enjoy the ship's amenities while it's less crowded. Another glance between them. They were recalculating, adjusting their plans based on my unexpected decision to remain aboard. Well, we're off to explore Hamilton, Evelyn announced brightly. Should be back by fall for departure. As they walked down the gangway toward shore, I watched through binoculars from the upper deck. They paused at the dock, heads close together in intense conversation, planning, strategizing, deciding how to handle their victim's unexpected behavior. On Father's Day, my daughter gave her father-in-law a new car worth $50,000 and demanded that I pay her mortgage by Sunday. When I asked for a small gift, her cold no destroyed years of sacrifice. I left a note and left. The next morning, I had 87 missed calls. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The door exploded open. I dropped my Civil War book, my reading glasses sliding down my nose as the hard cover hit the floor with a thud. My heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. Kendra never knocked anymore. She stood in my doorway, arms crossed, her shadow stretching across the small guest room that had become my entire world. The hallway light behind her made her face dark, unreadable, but her voice carried the same warmth as a January morning in Nebraska. "Dad, you remember the mortgage is due Monday, right?" Each word fell like ice chips. "If not, I know a great nursing home." The book lay open between us. Pages spread like broken wings. Chapter 7, When Families Divide. I stared at the words, then back at my daughter, the woman who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms.
Kendra, I always pay on time.
My voice cracked like old wood.
That's cruel.
It's reality. She shifted her weight, designer heels clicking on the hardwood. We have obligations, real ones. I gripped the bedsheet until my knuckles went white. 67 years of life had taught me many lessons, but nothing had prepared me for the moment my own daughter would speak to me like a burden to be managed, like something to be disposed of. I've never been late with her hand waved dismissively, cutting through my words like they were smoke. "Dad, please just make sure Monday happens." The guest room felt smaller now, walls pressing closer. My Civil War generals stared down from their frames. Men who knew about betrayal, about unexpected attacks from trusted allies, but even they looked surprised.
I understand you're stressed about money, sweetheart, but don't. The single word hit like a slap.
Just don't make this harder than it needs to be. She turned away, her blonde hair swishing like a curtain closing on a performance I never asked to see. Her heels tapped a staccato rhythm down the hallway. Click, 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 each step driving the knife deeper. The sound faded as she climbed the stairs to rejoin Corbin and their evening of Netflix and wine. I sat there in the sudden silence, the reading lamp casting a yellow circle around my chair. The house settled around me, old bones creaking. Upstairs I heard laughter. Their laughter, the kind that comes easy when you're not wondering where you'll sleep next month. The Civil War book lay open on the floor, pages wrinkled from the fall. I bent slowly, my arthritis protesting, and picked it up. The chapter title stared back at me. When brothers turn against brothers. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. I smoothed the damaged pages, my fingers trembling slightly. The author wrote about families torn apart by conflict, about sons who stopped recognizing their fathers, about daughters who chose sides. But those were different times, desperate times. Or were they? The framed photo of Martha sat on my nightstand, her smile frozen in silver. She'd been gone 5 years now, but I still talked to her sometimes, still asked her advice. Tonight, her eyes seemed to hold a question I wasn't ready to answer. I set the book aside and reached for her picture, the metal frame cool in my palm, the weight of it familiar, comforting. Martha with her Sunday dress and her patient smile. The woman who'd stood by me through 43 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, and one perfect daughter. One perfect daughter who just threatened to put me in a nursing home. The photo blurred as my eyes filled. I blinked hard, forcing the tears back.
Men my age didn't cry, especially not over their own children.
But as I held Martha's picture, I couldn't help remembering when everything had seemed so different, so full of promise. October 2023, Martha's photo took me back to that Sunday afternoon when everything changed. Kendra had been sitting right here in this very room, but it was her kitchen then, bright and welcoming, smelling of pot roast and possibility. "Dad, it'll be perfect." Her eyes had sparkled like they did when she was 7 and begging for a puppy. We'll be one big family. I'd held my coffee mug with both hands, studying her face for any sign of doubt.
Are you sure? I don't want to be in anyone's way.
In the way? She'd laughed.
Actually laughed, throwing her head back like I'd told the world's funniest joke. You're joking?
We've dreamed about this. Corbin had nodded enthusiastically from across the table. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. It makes perfect sense, Harren. Why should you rattle around in that big house alone? The big house, our house, Martha's and mine. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, the kitchen where she'd made Christmas cookies for 30 years, the living room where Kendra had taken her first steps, the master bedroom where Martha had breathed her last. I'd looked at Kendra that day, her face glowing with what seemed like genuine excitement, and felt something I hadn't experienced since Martha's funeral. Hope. The hope that maybe I wouldn't have to spend my remaining years talking to empty rooms and eating frozen dinners for one. Think about it, Dad. Kendra had reached across the table, covering my weathered hand with her smooth one.
No more yard work.
No more snow shoveling. No more rattling around by yourself. The real estate papers had been crisp and official. Black ink on white paper transforming 40 years of memories into a dollar amount.
$80,000's enough for Kendra's down payment. Enough to secure her dream house.
Enough to buy my way into her life. I'd sat in our old bedroom that final night, surrounded by boxes labeled Harlan's room in Kendra's careful handwriting. The silver frame holding Martha's photo had been the last thing I'd packed, wrapping it carefully in tissue paper, like a promise I was making to both of us.
We're doing the right thing, aren't we, sweetheart?
I'd whispered to the photo. Moving day had felt like a celebration. Kendra and Corbin had helped carry boxes, their chatter filling the silence that had haunted me for months. The guest room, my room, had been painted a soft blue, Martha's favorite color. Kendra had hung my Civil War prints herself, standing on a stepladder while I held the frame steady.
Perfect, she'd said, stepping back to admire her work.
This is going to be perfect, Dad. And for a while it was family dinners every night, conversation flowing like wine. Kendra would ask about my day, about the book I was reading, about stories from her childhood. Corbin would discuss the news, ask my opinion on politics and baseball. I'd felt useful again, wanted. The first month had been everything Kendra promised. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices, the house alive with purpose. In the evenings, we'd watch movies together, share popcorn, debate plot points like the family I'd thought we'd lost forever. I remembered the exact moment I'd believed I'd made the right choice. 3 weeks after moving in, Kendra had knocked on my door, actually knocked gently, and asked if I wanted to help her plant tulip bulbs in the front yard. For spring, she'd said, dirt already under her fingernails. Something to look forward to. We'd worked side by side in the October sunshine, planning the garden, talking about colors and bloom times. I'd felt like a father again, not just a guest in someone else's life. But tonight, holding Martha's photo in the same room where those tulip bulbs still waited underground, I couldn't remember the last time Kendra had knocked. Couldn't remember the last time she'd asked my opinion on anything more significant than whether I wanted my eggs scrambled or ovary. The silver frame reflected the bedside lamp, Martha's face wavering like a mirage. I placed the photo back on the nightstand, my fingers lingering on the cool metal. But when did the smile stop? I whispered to the empty room. I moved from the bed to my armchair by the window, needing to think clearly. Outside, the suburban street lay quiet under the streetlights, every house holding its own secrets. Tomorrow something would change in that driveway. I could feel it in my bones, the way I used to feel coming storms. The question haunted me. When did the smile stop? January 2024, that's when the cracks first appeared. It started with Corbin's morning greetings. For weeks he'd cheerfully called out, "Good morning, Harland," as he rushed past with his coffee and laptop bag. Then one Tuesday, in January, he just didn't. I'd been standing at the kitchen counter preparing my oatmeal when he swept through like I was furniture. "Morning," I'd offered hopefully.
Nothing, not even a glance.
I'd convinced myself he was stressed about work, preoccupied with some project deadline. But the silence stretched into days, then weeks. Soon, our kitchen encounters became an awkward dance, me trying to maintain normally while he treated me like an inconvenient obstacle. The dinner table told the real story. For months, we'd eaten together every evening, discussing our days, sharing stories, family meals, Kendra had called them. Then gradually I noticed I was eating alone more often. First once a week, then every other night.
Finally, every night.
We ate earlier, Kendra would explain when I asked. Didn't want to disturb your reading time. But I could hear them in the kitchen as I microwaved my reheated portion, their conversation flowing freely, punctuated by laughter that never included me. The sound carried through the thin walls like music from a party I hadn't been invited to. February brought the whispered conversations, doors that closed when I approached, my name floating through the house in hushed tones, always cut short when they noticed me. Too expensive to keep, I'd caught one evening, the words stopping abruptly when Corbin spotted me in the hallway.
Hey, Harlan, he'd said, his smile too bright, too forced. How's the book coming along?
The complaints began in March, small things at first. Dad, could you keep the TV volume down? Kendra had asked one evening, her tone suggesting I'd been blasting it at concert levels instead of the barely audible whisper I preferred. Your father always leaves dishes in the sink, I'd overheard Corbin tell her later that week. I'd started washing my single bowl and spoon immediately after eating, drying them, putting them away before they could complain. But the criticism found new targets. Maybe we need some house rules, Corbin had suggested one evening in March, his voice carrying the authority of someone addressing a problematic tenant.
House rules.
In the house, my money had helped by. I'd watch my world shrink day by day. My bathroom items mysteriously relocated to make room for guest supplies. My favorite chair in the living room gradually buried under their belongings. Magazines, throw pillows, Kendra's work laptop, the kitchen cabinets reorganized without discussion. My coffee and cereal moved to the highest shelf where my arthritic hands struggled to reach.
My bedroom became my refuge, then my prison.
I found myself spending entire days within these four walls, emerging only for meals and bathroom breaks. The house that had promised to be my sanctuary had become a maze of awkward encounters and cold shoulders. The worst part wasn't their growing hostility. It was my own shrinking sense of self.
I walked on eggshells, second-guessing every movement, every word.
I made myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable, hoping to recapture their approval. When had I stopped being family and started being a problem? The changes hadn't happened overnight. They'd been gradual, each shift small enough to justify, each new restriction reasonable when viewed in isolation. But together they painted a picture I'd been too afraid to see clearly. First, it was the TV volume, then the dishes, then the bathroom schedule, then the walking patterns through the house, then the very air I breathed seemed to annoy them. I'd adapted to each new rule, convinced that compliance would restore harmony, but harmony never came. Instead, I'd simply made myself invisible while remaining utterly, painfully present. 3 months. That's how long it had taken for my daughter's dream house to become my nightmare. The car engine hummed in the driveway, the sound cutting through my memories like a knife. Strange. Kendra's Honda was already there, and Corbin's truck sat beside it. I pulled back the curtain, peering into the darkness. Tomorrow would bring answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The gleam hit me first, blinding silver, catching the late afternoon sun like a mirror aimed at my eyes. I'd come outside to check the mail. 3 days of avoiding everyone since Friday's nursing home threat, but stopped mid-step on the front walkway. An Audi Q5 sat in our driveway. Our driveway, pristine, unmarked dealer tag, still attached like price tags on expensive jewelry. The car blocked my usual path to the mailbox, forcing me to walk around it just to retrieve the electric bill in grocery store circulars. $50,000. The number floated through my mind as I circled the vehicle, one finger tracing along the hood.
I knew cars.
40 years in construction meant working alongside men who talked horsepower and monthly payments during lunch breaks. Whose beautiful car is this? The front door opened before I finished the question. Kendra emerged first, Corbin right behind her, both wearing expressions I recognized from childhood. The look she'd get when bringing home report cards full of A's, expecting praise.
Ours, Corbin's chest swelled like he'd just announced a promotion to company president. Audi Q5, 50,000 fully loaded, every option.
The mail slipped from my fingers, envelopes scattering across the concrete like autumn leaves. I bent to gather them, my arthritic knees protesting while calculating mortgage payments in my head. 18 months. This car represented 18 months of mortgage payments. Wouldn't it have been smarter to put that toward the mortgage? The words left my mouth before I could stop them, gentle as I could make them, a suggestion from someone who cared about their financial future. Kendra's expression shifted faster than a Nebraska weather front. The pride vanished, replaced by the cold authority I'd learned to recognize over these past months. Dad, don't interfere in our business. Her voice carried the sharp edge of a woman who'd made her decision and wouldn't tolerate questions. Corbin's arm draped possessively over her shoulders, a united front against the old man who dared to suggest fiscal responsibility.
I'm not interfering. I straightened slowly, holding the scattered mail against my chest like armor. I'm just concerned about what?
Corbin stepped forward, his tone suggesting I'd overstepped invisible boundaries. We're adults, Harren. We can handle our own finances. Their own finances built on the foundation of my house sale and monthly mortgage contributions. I took a step backward, the physical retreat automatic after months of learning my place in this hierarchy. Of course you can.
I forced my voice to remain level, neutral.
It's a beautiful car. The compliment hung in the air between us, hollow as a campaign promise. Kendra's satisfied smile returned, but Corbin continued studying me with the weariness of someone protecting territory. We deserve nice things, Kendra said, running her hand along the car's side mirror. We work hard. They worked hard on a combined income that could cover their mortgage without my help. They'd chosen to spend my sacrifice on German engineering and leather seats, while I counted pennies for coffee and mended shirts instead of buying new ones. I'm sure you do, I managed. The conversation died there, killed by the weight of unspoken calculations. They retreated into the house, probably to admire their purchase from the living room window. I walked toward the front door, mail clutched in my trembling hands, but my mind stayed focused on those numbers. $50,000, 18 months of mortgage payments, 6 months of my entire pension, their celebration of luxury while threatening me with nursing homes. I picked up the scattered envelopes and walked toward the house, but my mind stayed focused on those numbers. 50,830 found me at my small desk by the window. Bank statements spread before me like evidence in a trial. I tried watching television after dinner, microwaved leftovers while they ate takeout Chinese upstairs, but the numbers kept circling in my head like vultures. My reading glasses slipped down my nose as I arranged the documents in chronological order.
Engineers' habits die hard.
6 months of mortgage payments, each one documented in my careful handwriting. $12,800 monthly, drawn from my $2,100 pension, plus $700 from savings that dwindled with each passing month. The calculator sat beside my coffee mug, its digital display showing the brutal arithmetic. My house sale, $180,000, their down payment secured by my generosity. Add 6 months of mortgage contributions, another $16,800, total investment in their dream, $196,800. Their car payment alone would cover my monthly grocery budget for 2 years. I pulled out my personal ledger, the small notebook, where I tracked every dollar. $20 for groceries each week, stretching ground beef and pasta into meals that lasted 3 days. $5 for coffee, 1 small bag monthly. My winter coat held together with safety pins because $30 for a new one seemed wasteful when they needed mortgage help. While I denied myself basics, they'd spent $50,000 on transportation. The Audi gleamed under the streetlight outside my window, taunting me with its perfection. I'd sold my Honda 3 months ago, convincing myself I didn't need 2 cars in one household. Walking to the pharmacy and grocery store seemed reasonable for a man my age. Exercise, I told myself.
Now I understood the real reason.
They needed my car gone to make room for their luxury. My hands shook as I held the calculator, the plastic warm from my grip. When had I become their personal bank instead of their family? When did my sacrifice transform from love into obligation, expected rather than appreciated?
I count every penny to pay their mortgage while they spend $50,000 on a car, I whispered to the empty room.
The sound of laughter drifted down from upstairs, punctuating my solitude. They celebrated their purchase while I sat alone with the evidence of my exploitation. Each bank statement told the same story. Harren Whitaker, willing victim, funding the lifestyle of people who saw him as a burden. I traced the mortgage payment amounts with my finger, wearing a groove in the paper. 18 months. This car represented 18 months of my sacrifice, months of careful denial, while they lived without consequence. My worn leather wallet lay beside the statements, nearly empty except for my Medicare card and $23 in cash. Everything else went to them, to their dreams, to their future, that apparently didn't include gratitude or basic respect. The numbers didn't lie. Their combined income of $150,000 annually could easily cover the mortgage without my help. They'd convinced me I was needed when I was simply convenient, a source of funding that came with built-in guilt and family obligation. Standing by the window, I looked down at their gleaming investment. Tomorrow they'd drive to work in luxury while I walked to the pharmacy, in shoes I'd resoled twice. They'd adjust the heated seats while I adjusted my thermostat to save on heating bills. I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. The realization settled over me like a cold blanket. Love and exploitation could wear the same face, speak with the same voice, demand the same sacrifices. The difference lay in gratitude versus entitlement, respect versus dismissal. They felt entitled to my money and dismissive of my presence. The equation couldn't be clearer. I closed the statements and looked at the calendar on my desk. June 16th was circled in red, Father's Day 2 months away. Sunday morning arrived with the familiar weight of expectation. I dressed more carefully than usual, choosing my best casual shirt and taking extra time with my hair. Father's Day deserved something different, something warmer than the cold routine our Sundays had become. At the top of the stairs, I paused to listen. Kendra's voice drifted up from the kitchen, animated and bright.
A phone conversation, the kind that made me hesitate before descending, not wanting to interrupt something important. Leland, happy Father's Day. Her enthusiasm hit me like sunrise after a long night.
This was the voice I remembered from childhood, from Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations.
Genuine joy, unrehearsed and infectious.
Come over tonight for a special dinner. We'll have everything ready, your favorite pot roast and that chocolate cake you love. I straightened my shirt and began my descent, each step deliberate enough to announce my approach. The anticipation built with every word she spoke, every laugh that bubbled up from the kitchen. After months of cold exchanges and businesslike conversations, perhaps today would restore something we'd lost. 6-12 will be perfect. Marlene will love the flowers I picked out. Flowers, special dinner, celebration preparations. My heart lifted despite everything that had happened. Father's Day meant recognition, meant remembering the relationship that mattered more than mortgage payments and household tensions. I reached the kitchen doorway and waited, not wanting to interrupt her plans, but positioning myself where she couldn't miss my presence. The morning light caught her blonde hair as she gestured enthusiastically, even though Leland couldn't see her through the phone.
It's going to be wonderful, she continued.
A real celebration for someone who deserves it.
Someone who deserves it.
The words wrapped around me like a warm blanket.
After months of feeling unwanted, perhaps today I'd remember what it felt like to be celebrated instead of tolerated.
See you tonight. Love you. The call ended with such warmth that I felt my own smile forming. My turn now, my moment for Father's Day recognition from the daughter who'd once been my entire world. Kendra turned, noticed me standing there, and offered the same perfunctory nod she'd given me every morning for weeks. Good morning. No mention of the holiday, no acknowledgement of what day meant to fathers everywhere, just the same businesslike greetings she'd used with a hotel desk clerk. Good morning, I replied, waiting for more, for the warmth that had filled her voice moments before, for some small recognition that I, too, was a father deserving of celebration.
Nothing came.
She moved past me toward the dining room, already focused on her next task. The phone call's joy had been reserved entirely for Leland, packaged and delivered with genuine affection. For me, she had only the standard courtesy of a landlord acknowledging a tenant. I stood alone in the kitchen, still holding my empty coffee mug, while she bustled through the house, making preparation sounds. Cabinet doors opening, pans clattering. The cheerful chaos of someone creating something special, just not for me. Standing there with my empty coffee mug, I understood that in this house there was only room for one father to be celebrated, and it wasn't me. The recognition I'd hoped for, the warmth I'd dressed up to receive, belonged to someone else entirely. I returned to my room and heard the sounds of preparation beginning in the kitchen. Cabinet doors opening, pans clattering. The celebration was starting, just not for me. Car doors slammed outside, followed by excited voices cutting through the evening air. I straightened my shirt and left my room for the first time since morning, drawn by sounds I'd almost forgotten existed in this house. Genuine warmth and welcome. Leland gripped my hand like we were old friends, reuniting after years apart, his callous palm familiar from decades of automotive work. The man had built his business from nothing, retiring with dignity and respect from his community. "Aaron, how are you?"
Haven't seen you in too long.
Marlene touched my arm while surveying the living room, her admiration sincere rather than polite. "What a beautiful home you have here." "The decorating is just lovely."
I watched Kendra transform before my eyes, becoming someone I barely recognized.
Gone was the cold efficiency I'd grown accustomed to, replaced by a gracious hostess who laughed at Leland's stories and fussed over Marlene's comfort like a devoted daughter-in-law. "Dad, come join us for dinner." Her invitation carried the appropriate family warmth, performed for an audience, but executed flawlessly. "Thank you."
That's very kind.
I kept my voice measured, dignified, maintaining the careful distance she'd taught me over these past months. Corbin emerged from the kitchen carrying gift bags with obvious ceremony, his chest puffed with the importance of whatever surprise they'd planned. The dining room table gleamed under soft lighting, decorated with flowers, and the good china reserved for special occasions. My place setting waited at the table's far end, present but unremarkable. Leland's chair faced the window, positioned like a throne with fresh flowers arranged behind him. The contrast wasn't subtle, but then again, subtlety had never been Kendra's strength. Throughout dinner, Leland asked about my health, my reading, whether I'd been following the baseball season. Marlene inquired about my arthritis, suggesting remedies that had helped her sister. They treated me like family, like someone whose opinions mattered, whose presence added value to the gathering. Watching Kendra maintain her perfect daughter-in-law performance, I wondered if this warm, gracious woman had always been inside her, reserved only for people who weren't me. She laughed at Leland's automotive stories, refilled Marlene's wine glass without being asked, remembered details about their church activities and neighborhood gossip. For them, she was everything a daughter should be. For me, she saved nothing. The pot roast was exceptional, tender enough to cut with a fork. The conversation flowed around topics that included everyone, except when it drifted toward finances, at which point Kendra smoothly redirected towards safer subjects. She was protecting her performance, maintaining the illusion of domestic harmony. Corbin played his supporting role perfectly, differential to Leland's opinions, while demonstrating his provider status through casual mentions of work projects and recent purchases. He avoided mentioning the Audi directly, saving that revelation for maximum impact. As we finished the main course, Kendra stood and reached for something behind her chair. Her smile was different now, excited, almost theatrical. "Before dessert," she announced, "we have a special surprise." Kendra lifted her champagne glass, the crystal catching candlelight like captured starlight. Every eye focused on her as she savored the moment, a conductor preparing to lead her orchestra through its most dramatic movement. "Happy Father's Day, Leland." Here are the keys to your new car. The Audi keys hit the table with a metallic clink that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. 50,000 in German engineering. Presented with the flourish of someone unveiling a masterpiece, Leland stared at the keys like they might explode in his palm.
This is impossible.
We can't accept this. Marlene covered her mouth, her eyes wide with genuine shock.
Kendra, this is too much.
We couldn't possibly take something so expensive. Nonsense. Kendra's voice rang with theatrical generosity.
You've been like real parents to me.
You deserve something special. Corbin leaned forward, supporting his wife's grand gesture with obvious pride. It's already yours, Leland.
Title's in your name.
Insurance paid for the year. The magnitude of their gift settled over the table like a heavy blanket. $50,000, more than my annual pension, more than most people spent on their homes, down payments, given casually, joyfully, to a man they'd known 8 years.
Oh, and Dad! Kendra's tone shifted to business casual, the way she might remind someone about a dental appointment.
The mortgage needs to be paid by Sunday. The words hung in the air between the champagne glasses and flower arrangements. A $50,000 gift followed immediately by a mortgage payment reminder. The juxtaposition was so stark it felt intentional, designed for maximum cruelty. I set down my fork carefully, meeting my daughter's eyes across the festive table. Don't I deserve even a small gift? The question came out quieter than I had intended, carrying months of accumulated hurt and the weight of sacrifices she'd never acknowledged. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for her response. No, one word, delivered with the finality of a judge's gavel. No explanation, no softening, no acknowledgement that the question deserved consideration, just the brutal honesty of someone who'd stopped pretending to care about my feelings. Leland's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Marlene's wine glass trembled in her grip. Even Corbin shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing that his wife had crossed a line visible to everyone at the table. I smiled, a careful, controlled expression that I'd practiced in mirrors during my loneliest moments in this house. The smile of a man who'd finally received the clarity he'd been seeking for months.
Of course not.
I pushed back my chair slowly, each movement deliberate and dignified.
Excuse me. The hallway stretched before me like a pathway to freedom.
Each step taking me further from the celebration that had never included me. Behind me, the silence gradually gave way to nervous conversation as they tried to pretend nothing significant had happened, but something had happened. Something final and irrevocable, something that would require action rather than endurance. I closed my bedroom door and heard the celebration continue without me. Laughter, champagne corks, the sound of people who had forgotten I existed. I sat on my bed and looked around the room that had never felt like home. Tencha brought the sound of departing guests, Cardor's final goodbyes, Leland's voice expressing bewildered gratitude for a gift he couldn't quite accept. By 11:30 the house settled into silence, my family sleeping off their evening of celebration and cruelty. I sat on my bed's edge, no longer listening to their sounds, but making calculations. Engineers' calculations? Problem-solving equations that balance sacrifice against reward, investment against return, love against exploitation. The mathematics were simple. I'd given everything and received nothing. Time to recalculate. Midnight found me opening drawers with surgical precision, folding clothes the way the army had taught me 40 years ago. 2 suitcases methodically packed with essentials that could rebuild a life. Not much accumulated in 6 months of guest room living. From my small filing box, I gathered documents that mattered. Passport, social security card, bank cards, certificates that proved my existence independent of their mortgage payments. Everything that defined Harland Whitaker before he became their personal ATM. I left behind the expensive watch Kendra had given me last Christmas, its leather band unworn because I'd sensed even then that gifts from her came with invisible strings. Martha's silver-framed photo went into the suitcase. She'd understand this decision. She'd probably made it months ago. The note required careful consideration. Too much explanation would sound like pleading. Too little might seem impulsive. I settled on words that carried the weight of finality without sacrificing dignity. I'm gone. By the time you read this, I am stopping payment on your mortgage and changing my will. I'm tired of being your ATM, Harlan. I placed it on the kitchen table where they'd find it first, weighted down with the salt shaker Kendra had bought to match her perfect table settings. My signature looked formal, final, the mark of a man closing accounts rather than opening negotiations. The smartphone taxi app worked efficiently at 2:30 in the morning, promising arrival in 15 minutes. Plenty of time for final preparations, final glances at a place that had promised to be home, but had become a prison funded by my own generosity. I carried the suitcases one at a time, minimizing noise that might wake the family sleeping peacefully upstairs. Each step through the hallway felt lighter than the last, as if I were shedding weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The front door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like freedom. No dramatic slams, no final confrontations, no theatrical exits, just the quiet departure of a man who'd learned the difference between being needed and being used. The taxi merged onto the highway, and I gave the driver the address of the Prairie Motel. For the first time in months, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. For the first time in months, that felt like freedom. The Prairie Inn's clerk barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I approached the front desk, my 2 suitcases trailing behind me like loyal companions. 3 in the morning brought out the essential transactions. No small talk, no questions about circumstances that led grown men to motel at ungodly hours.
How many nights will you be staying?
A week for now, possibly longer. I placed my credit card on the scarred counter, savoring the simple act of making my own financial decisions. Room 127 smelled of industrial cleaner and possibility. Single bed, small desk, television, mounted on the wall like a window to worlds I might explore again. I hung my clothes in the narrow closet with military precision, each shirt spaced evenly, each pair of pants creased just so. For the first time in months, I slept without listening for footsteps in hallways that weren't mine. Monday morning brought 17 missed calls and 11 voicemails, the digital evidence of their panic cascading across my phone screen like falling dominoes. I listened to the first message, Kendra's voice stretched thin with disbelief, then turned the device off completely and placed it face down in the desk drawer. My choice now, my schedule, my silence. Downtown Omaha's legal district buzzed with purpose that matched my own. Patricia Mitchell's office occupied the 15th floor of a building that spoke of competence rather than flash. Exactly what I needed for the morning's business. Are you certain about this decision, Mr. Whitaker? Patricia's pen hovered over the will modification documents, her professional duty requiring one final confirmation. Absolutely. I met her gaze without wavering. She made her choice when she chose cruelty over kindness. The new will was elegant in its simplicity. Martha's Church would receive the bulk of my estate, with smaller amounts designated for veterans organizations and the local library. Kendra's name appeared nowhere in the 20-page document. Your daughter will receive formal notification of these changes within 30 days, Patricia explained, sliding the papers across her mahogany desk. I signed each page with the steady hand of a man building rather than destroying, creating justice rather than seeking revenge. The ink dried quickly, sealing decisions that should have been made months ago. Walking back to the Prairie Inn, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Martha's death. Anticipation for tomorrow, not the dread that had accompanied each morning in Kendra's house, but genuine curiosity about what I might choose to do with the hours ahead. The motel room had transformed overnight from temporary shelter into launching pad. I opened my laptop and began researching housing options in Bellevue, a quiet suburb 20 minutes south of Omaha. Houses with gardens, places where neighbors minded their own business while remaining neighborly. As afternoon shadows stretched across the parking lot, I walked to the small park across from the motel, carrying the book I'd started reading on my first night of freedom. The morning sun felt different on my face, warmer, more welcoming. 7 days of peaceful routine had established themselves by the time they found me. Coffee at 6, breakfast at the diner next door, morning walks to the park with whatever book currently held my attention. Saturday afternoon found me on my usual bench,
absorbed in a biography of Eisenhower when their desperate energy invaded my sanctuary. I sensed them before I saw them.
the frantic quality of people whose carefully constructed world had collapsed overnight. Kendra's Honda sat crooked in the parking space, abandoned rather than parked. Through my peripheral vision, I watched them approach like storm clouds gathering momentum. "Dad, I'm sorry.
We were wrong.
Please come home." Kendra's tears had started before she reached my bench, her makeup streaking in ways that suggested this wasn't their first attempt to find me today. She moved with the jerky motions of someone operating on caffeine and panic rather than sleep. I closed the book carefully, marking my place with the receipt I'd been using as a bookmark.
This isn't my home anymore, Kendra.
Corbin arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train, his usual swagger replaced by something approaching desperation.
"Oh man, you can't do this to us. We have a mortgage."
"You have a mortgage," I corrected, standing slowly and brushing imaginary dust from my pants. "I have my independence." The truth of my words hit them like cold water. For months they'd convinced themselves that my support was obligation rather than gift, permanent rather than conditional. The withdrawal of funding had shattered their assumptions about how the world worked. With change, Kendra's voice cracked with the strain of promises she'd never intended to keep. "We'll treat you better. We'll include you in everything." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw desperation wearing the mask of remorse. Not sorrow for the pain she'd caused, but panic about the consequences she now faced. The distinction mattered more than she could understand. "I'm buying my own house in Bellevue," I said quietly, watching their faces register this new information. "I'm finally happy." Corbin's anger erupted like a pressure valve releasing steam. "You selfish old fool. What about our investment? What about the plans we made?" "Plans you made without consulting me," I replied, my voice steady as granite. "Investments you made with my money while treating me like an unwelcome guest." They'd tracked me through credit card records, probably hired someone to watch the motel, until my routine became predictable. The thought of their desperation driving them to surveillance would have amused me if it weren't so pathetic.
"Please, Dad." Kendra reached for my arm, her fingers grasping like someone drowning.
"We're family. Family doesn't threaten each other with nursing homes," I said, gently but firmly, removing her hand from my sleeve. "Family doesn't spend $50,000 on cars while demanding mortgage payments from pensioners." The words hung between us like a verdict neither of them could appeal. I picked up my book and looked at both of them with something approaching pity.
"Don't look for me again."
I walked back to my motel room and called the real estate agent I'd been working with. "I'm ready to make that offer on the house in Bellevue." I told her the future was waiting. October brought the kind of Nebraska morning that made gardening feel like meditation. 4 months in my own house had established rhythms I'd forgotten existed. Coffee at sunrise, tending tomatoes and marigolds before the day grew too warm. Evening walks through neighborhoods where people waved without expecting conversation. The letter from Patricia Mitchell arrived on a Tuesday, mixed in with utility bills and grocery store circulars like any other piece of ordinary mail, but its contents carried the weight of completed justice. Natural consequences finally catching up with choices long overdue for reckoning. The foreclosure proceedings concluded last month, Patricia had written in her precise legal handwriting. "Your former residence was sold at auction. I thought you should know."
I set the letter on my kitchen table.
My kitchen table in my kitchen in the house I'd chosen and purchased with money I'd earned, and felt something approaching peace settle over me like a favorite blanket. They'd lost everything because they'd never learned the difference between earning and taking. 3 missed mortgage payments had been enough. Without my monthly contributions, their combined income couldn't cover the lifestyle they'd built on my sacrifice. The Audi had been repossessed first, then the house that had never felt like home anyway. According to Patricia's sources, they'd moved to a small apartment across town, Their marriage strained by financial pressures they'd never learned to manage without my subsidy.
Leland and Marlene had kept the car, a gift given in love rather than manipulation.
But offered no additional support to children who'd squandered their grandfather's generosity. Some relationships cost more than they're worth, I reflected, watching a cardinal build its nest in the maple tree I'd planted last month. The bird understood something about independence that had taken me 67 years to learn. My garden was coming along nicely, tomatoes heavy on the vine, flowers blooming in colors I'd chosen because they made me smile. No one criticized the time I spent nurturing growth.
No one demanded explanations for my choices.
No one treated my presence like an inconvenience requiring tolerance. The phone rang occasionally, telemarketers mostly, sometimes neighbors, inviting me to block parties or community events. I answered when I wanted to and let it ring when I didn't. Revolutionary concepts that had taken months to feel natural. Finishing my coffee, I rinsed the cup in my own sink and stepped back into my garden. There was still work to do before winter, and for the first time in years, I was eager to do it. They'd lost everything, and I'd finally found peace. The lesson was learned. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.